6 people bought tickets to see The Forever Purge at a California movie theater on a Monday night in July. Among them were 2 teenagers, Anthony and Rylee, on their very first date. The theater was nearly empty, the lights dimmed, the movie started, and then, just minutes into the film, one of the 6 people stood up and walked out. He returned carrying a backpack. Inside that backpack was a ghost gun he'd assembled a month earlier. Within an hour, 2 teenagers would be shot execution style in their seats, killed by someone they'd never met, never spoken to, never even made eye contact with. This is the story of a completely unprovoked attack that shattered 2 families, a killer who claimed voices made him do it, and the fight to prove he knew exactly what he was doing when he pulled that trigger. Anthony Barajas was 19 years old, a young man with nearly 1 million followers on TikTok, under the username It's Inthorna Mitchell. He'd started posting in 2019, creating singing videos, challenges, and pranks that resonated with people across the country. His quick smile and compassionate heart made him impossible not to love. Anthony's mother, Catherine Barajas, would later describe him as someone known for his kindness, a person whose presence was a gift to all who knew him. He'd played soccer at Mater Dei High School and had recently returned home to Corona, California, from a trip to Hawaii. 18-year-old Rylee Goodrich was a sophomore at Grand Canyon University, an athlete from Corona High School whose Christian faith was the center of her life. Friends and family remembered her as someone full of love and light, a young woman whose favorite color was pink and whose smile could brighten the darkest days. Rylee had her whole life ahead of her, dreams of what she'd become, plans for a future that stretched out endlessly before her. On Monday, July 26, 2021, Anthony and Rylee went on their first date. Anthony had just gotten back from Hawaii, and the timing felt right. They decided to see a movie at the Regal Theater at the Crossings in Corona, a familiar spot in their hometown. The movie they chose was The Forever Purge, a horror film about a night when all crime becomes legal. It was the 9:35 p.m. showing, late enough that the theater wouldn't be crowded. They bought their tickets, grabbed their snacks, and found their seats in the nearly empty auditorium. Neither of them had any way of knowing that someone else in that theater had brought more than popcorn and candy. They didn't know that one of the other 4 people in the auditorium had assembled a ghost gun a month earlier, a 9mm handgun with no serial number, untraceable and deadly. They didn't know that within minutes of the movie starting, that person would leave the theater, return with a backpack, and turn their first date into a crime scene. Anthony and Rylee settled into their seats, the lights dimmed, and the movie began. They were just 2 teenagers trying to enjoy a summer night together. But someone in that theater had already decided they were going to die, and there was absolutely nothing they could have done to stop what was about to happen. Only 6 tickets were sold for the 9:35 p.m. showing of The Forever Purge at the Regal Theater that night. Anthony Barajas and Rylee Goodrich occupied 2 of those seats. The other 4 tickets belonged to 20-year-old Joseph Jimenez and 3 of his high school friends. It was an eerily quiet screening, the kind where every sound echoes through the empty auditorium. The previews played, the movie started, and then, just a few minutes into the film, Joseph Jimenez stood up and walked out of the theater. His friends didn't think much of it. People leave movies all the time. Bathroom breaks, phone calls. Maybe he forgot something in the car. But when Jimenez returned, he was carrying a backpack he hadn't brought in with him. He told one of his friends that the backpack contained a strap, street slang for a handgun. The friend later told investigators about that moment, about the casual way Jimenez mentioned the gun, as if it were nothing unusual. Then Jimenez and his 3 friends left the theater together, but Jimenez didn't stay gone. His friends walked away, heading out to the parking lot or the lobby, but Jimenez turned around. He went back into that dark auditorium where Anthony and Rylee sat watching the movie, completely absorbed in the story unfolding on screen. They had no idea someone had just walked back in. No idea that person was carrying a loaded 9mm ghost gun. No idea they had seconds left to live. Joseph Jimenez raised the gun and fired. Anthony Barajas was shot in the head. Rylee Goodrich was shot in the head. The shots were execution style, closer range, deliberate. There was no confrontation, no argument, no exchange of words, or even eye contact beforehand. Corona Police Corporal Tobias Kurubakalis would later describe the attack as completely unprovoked, stating that the victims were shot without any kind of prior contact. Anthony and Rylee never saw it coming. One moment they were on their first date, watching a movie in the dark. The next moment, everything went black, for real. Around 11:30 p.m., two of Jimenez's friends saw him running from the theater. He jumped into his car and sped away, tires screeching as he fled the scene. Inside the auditorium, Anthony and Rylee lay bleeding in their seats. The movie kept playing on the screen above them. The fictional violence of the forever purge, a grotesque backdrop to the real horror that had just unfolded. Staff eventually discovered the scene. Emergency services were called. The theater was evacuated and locked down. Rylee Goodrich was pronounced dead at the scene. The bullet had killed her almost instantly, stealing away the young woman full of love and light before she even had a chance to understand what was happening. Anthony Barajas was still alive, but barely. He was rushed to a nearby hospital and placed on life support. For 5 agonizing days, his family held on to hope, praying for a miracle that would never come. On Saturday, July 31st, 2021, Anthony's family confirmed his death. The TikTok star, known for his kindness and quick smile, was gone. His nearly 1 million followers left mourning a creator who'd brought joy to so many lives. Joseph Jimenez was arrested the day after the shooting at a residence in El Cerrito, an unincorporated area outside Corona. Police moved quickly, identifying him through witness statements from his friends and security footage from the theater. During the search of his home, authorities recovered a firearm that matched the caliber of the weapon used in the shooting. It was a 9mm ghost gun, a weapon Jimenez had assembled himself about a month before the attack. Ghost guns are untraceable because they lack serial numbers, making them popular among people who want to avoid legal scrutiny. Jimenez had procured the parts and put the gun together with the kind of planning that directly contradicted what he would later claim about his state of mind. The investigation moved rapidly. Police determined that Jimenez acted alone. There was no evidence that Anthony's status as a TikTok influencer motivated the crime. This wasn't a targeted attack based on jealousy or internet fame. It was something far more disturbing, a completely random act of violence. 2 teenagers were murdered simply because they happened to be in the same theater as someone who decided to bring a gun and use it. The senselessness of it was almost impossible to comprehend. Anthony and Rylee had done nothing wrong. They'd never met Joseph Jimenez. They'd never interacted with him. They were just 2 kids on a first date who picked the wrong movie, showing on the wrong night. The Riverside County District Attorney's Office charged Jimenez with 2 counts of murder. Initially, he was charged with the murder of Rylee Goodrich and attempted murder of Anthony Barajas, but after Anthony died, prosecutors added a second murder charge. The charges included a sentencing enhancement for the personal use of a firearm causing death. But the DA's office went further, filing special circumstance allegations of lying in wait and multiple murders. These special circumstances made Joseph Jimenez eligible for the death penalty if convicted as charged. District Attorney Mike Hestron would later decide whether to actually seek execution, but the option was on the table. When Jimenez appeared in Riverside County Superior Court on Friday, July 30th, 2021, he didn't enter a plea. The trial was postponed. But in September 2021, Jimenez made a decision that would shape the entire legal battle to come. He pleaded not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity to the 2 murder counts. It was a dual plea that set up 2 potential trial phases. First, a guilt phase to determine if he committed the murders, and second, a phase to determine whether he was legally sane when he did it. The defense's strategy became clear. Jimenez's attorney, Charles Kenyon, argued that his client was suffering from schizophrenia at the time of the shooting. In a jailhouse interview, Jimenez claimed he was tormented by voices that told him his friends and family were going to be killed. According to Jimenez, these voices drove him to shoot Anthony and Rylee because he believed he had to protect the people he loved. Kenyon argued that Jimenez was not rational at the time of the shooting, that he was misguided by the voices, and that he believed he had no options in that theater. The defense painted a picture of a young man acting out of fear, literally insane, suffering from delusions and hearing ghosts that commanded him to commit violence. Kenyon went further, suggesting the tragedy was ultimately a result of the failures of the mental health system. He pointed to inadequate care and hospitalizations, arguing that Jimenez had fallen through the cracks of a system that should have helped him. It was a sympathetic narrative designed to shift blame away from Jimenez's choices and onto the disease supposedly controlling his mind. If the jury believed Jimenez was truly insane, he could be sent to a mental health facility instead of prison, potentially avoiding a murder conviction altogether. But Deputy District Attorney Kevin Beecham wasn't buying it. The prosecution launched a systematic takedown of Jimenez's insanity defense, arguing that he was not credible and had a history of exaggerating facts. Beecham presented evidence showing that Jimenez had been admitted to hospitals for mental health treatment multiple times in the 11 months before the killings. But here's the critical detail. Jimenez ignored discharge orders. He failed to show up for follow-up appointments. He didn't refill his psychotropic medications, and he regularly abused marijuana and alcohol, even recording some of this substance abuse on his cell phone. The prosecution argued that Jimenez's actions demonstrated he knew he did something morally wrong and fled. If he was truly in the grip of an uncontrollable psychotic episode, why did he run? Why did he speed away from the theater like someone who understood the consequences of what he'd just done? Beecham highlighted the fact that Jimenez chose to leave the theater and then return. If the voices were telling him his friends and family were in imminent danger, why did he walk out with those friends, watch them leave safely, and then go back inside alone? The prosecution pointed out that by Jimenez's own testimony, the voices had gone silent by the time he made the decision to return to the auditorium. And then there was the detail that completely undermined the defense's narrative. Jimenez told detectives that he returned to the theater because he didn't want to miss the last 20 minutes of the film. He wanted to see how the forever purge ended. That statement was devastating to the insanity defense. A person in genuine fear for the lives of his friends and family, a person controlled by commanding voices, doesn't casually return to finish watching a movie. That's the behavior of someone who's made a conscious choice, someone who understands what he's doing and decides to see it through. The prosecution used Jimenez's own words to prove he was thinking clearly, making decisions, and acting with intent. The case moved forward not with a traditional criminal trial but with a bench trial, where a judge would hear the evidence and determine Jimenez's state of mind at the time of the murders. Jimenez had withdrawn his not guilty pleas, essentially admitting he killed Anthony and Rylee, but maintaining the insanity defense. Everything now hinged on whether Superior Court Judge Timothy J. Hollenhorst would believe that Joseph Jimenez was legally insane when he walked into that theater with a ghost gun and shot 2 teenagers in the head. The prosecution's case was methodical and damning. They showed that Jimenez had assembled the ghost gun a month before the attack, demonstrating premeditation. They showed that he deliberately brought the gun to the theater in his car, retrieved it during the movie, and told his friend about the strap in his backpack. They showed that he left the theater with his friends, let them walk away safely, and then made a conscious decision to return. They showed that he fled the scene immediately after the shooting, the behavior that indicated he knew what he'd done was wrong and feared the consequences. And they used his own statement about wanting to see the end of the movie to prove he was thinking rationally throughout the entire sequence of events. The defense tried to counter with expert testimony about schizophrenia, with Jimenez's claims about voices, with arguments about the mental health system's failures. But the evidence against the insanity defense was overwhelming. Jimenez's actions told a story of choice, not compulsion, of planning, not psychosis, of someone who understood right from wrong and chose wrong anyway. In December 2023, more than 2 years after Anthony Barajas and Rylee Goodrich were murdered, Judge Timothy J. Hollenhorst delivered his ruling. Joseph Jimenez was sane when he fatally shot the 2 teenagers. The insanity defense had failed. Jimenez was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with the special circumstance allegations of lying in wait and taking multiple lives. The verdict meant Jimenez would face the harshest possible punishment under California law, life in prison without the possibility of parole. The families of Anthony and Rylee had waited through years of legal proceedings, through endless court dates and postponements, through the agonizing process of watching the defense try to paint their children's killer as a victim of mental illness. They'd sat through testimony about voices and delusions, through arguments that tried to shift blame away from the person who'd stolen their children's futures. And now, finally, they had a verdict that acknowledged the truth. Joseph Jimenez knew what he was doing. He chose to bring a gun to that theater. He chose to shoot 2 innocent people, and he would pay for those choices with the rest of his life. On Monday, February 26, 2024, Joseph Jimenez, then 23 years old, stood before Judge Hollenhorst for sentencing. 7 members of the victims' families gave heartfelt statements, pouring out years of grief, anger, and loss. Rylee's grandmother, Jody Goodrich, spoke about the young woman full of love and light who'd been stolen from them. She described the hole Rylee's death had left in their family, the birthdays and holidays that would never be the same, the future grandchildren who would never know their aunt. Catherine Barajas, Anthony's mother, spoke about her son's kindness, about the small acts of goodness he'd spread throughout his life, about the legacy she intended to carry forward in his name. Before the families spoke, Joseph Jimenez addressed the court. His words were brief and hollow. He said, "I just want to say to the families that I'm sorry, and I wish I never did what I did, and my condolences. If things could have been different, I would have made a different choice." It was an apology that rang empty after years of claiming he hadn't been in control of his actions. After blaming voices and mental illness for murders he'd planned and executed with cold calculation. The families sitting in that courtroom had heard him claim insanity for more than 2 years. His sudden acknowledgement of having made a choice felt like too little, too late. Judge Hollenhorst sentenced Joseph Jimenez to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 50 years to life. The sentence ensured that Jimenez would never walk free again. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, growing old in a cell while the families of Anthony and Rylee learned to live with the permanent absence of the people they loved. Before delivering the sentence, Judge Hollenhorst offered a final message. He noted that parents are not supposed to bury children, acknowledging the unnatural horror of outliving your own child. He expressed hope that deep down in Jimenez's soul, he would feel genuine sorrow for taking the lives of 2 innocent victims. Anthony Barajas and Rylee Goodrich were both just beginning their adult lives when Joseph Jimenez decided to end them. Anthony had dreams of expanding his social media presence, of using his platform to spread positivity and kindness. Rylee had dreams of finishing college, of building a life grounded in faith and love. Those dreams died in a dark theater on a Monday night in July, extinguished by bullets fired by someone they'd never met. Their families were left with memories and questions and a grief that would never fully fade. And Joseph Jimenez was left with exactly what he deserved, a life sentence that would keep him locked away until his last breath, ensuring he could never hurt anyone else the way he hurt Anthony and Rylee and everyone who loved them.